Hey quilters, it's Pam Heller. Thanks for joining me today. We are so honored to have the quilts by Andrew Lee, otherwise known as the Combat Quilter, hanging in our gallery. Let's go check it out. So nice to have you here with us today. Thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us. Okay, so here's my favorite question to ask quilters is tell me a little bit about your quilting journey. How did you get to this point?
My wife one day said to me that we didn't do enough together, and I didn't quite understand what that meant. We're remodeling a house, we do yard work, I visit the in-laws, we go out to dinner, we go to historic places. I'm not sure what more together you wanted. We left the conversation at that, and a couple of days later, I beat her home from work, and in the mailbox was a quilted table runner class 2-for-1, and it was a $30 thing. And I thought, oh, this will be great. I'll make one for my mom. She can make one for her mom.
There you go.
We did it together. $30. 3 women are happy. Has never been done in history before. So I thought this is a win-win for everybody. Well, as it turns out, during the class, it was a table runner, nothing special, jelly roll. Sure. And the woman had asked if we had sewn before, and I said no, I hadn't sewn before. You know, I grew up underneath the sewing machine. My mom had sewn, made our clothes as kids and stuff. So I was completely done with the table runner. And she says, "Are you having difficulty?" And I said, "No, ma'am, I'm done." And she's like, "Wait a minute, you said you didn't sew before. How are you done already?" I said, "Well, I'm Army. I follow directions well. This is easy," and I got hooked.
It's a great story. And so does your wife continue to sew and quilt with you now?
She does. She does more purses and wallets and aprons and thread catchers and
those kind of things.
Yeah, crafty stuff. I mean, a bazillion things she makes.
And so what kind of prompted you to go from making table runners to making quilts? Because that's kind of a big leap.
Okay, so the table runner wasn't very big, and I thought in that same flyer was a quilt that I had liked that was a raccoon pattern, and I was like, there's no way that I can do a raccoon, but maybe I can do, like blocks. Oh, so sure. I just thought 4.5-inch blocks, I'll cut it out, I'll sew it. And in doing so, we went back to the store to get fabric, and we ran into the husband and wife team that runs the North Knoxville Quilts of Valor group. And Dennis had invited me to a men's group.
Sure.
That does Quilts of Valor. And in that group, 6 of us, 3 of them were veterans. And that's how I got roped into, lured, or if you will, and I never really knew that quilting is what I needed in my life.
Right.
As a combat veteran with PTSD, I needed something. And for a long time, I thought it was video games, and that didn't work to fulfill that yearning, satisfaction thing. And I tried my artistic side. I paint a little bit, I draw, and that wasn't it. And then this quilting thing just fell into my lap, and I got hooked. It's very therapeutic.
Now, how many Quilts of Valor quilts have you done? Because I know you've done quite a few.
79 as of right now.
That's awesome. And do you work on them on a regular basis? Like, do you have a group that you meet with and work on those Quilts of Valor?
I do. I'm part of a couple guilds and a couple groups, but our men's group, due to the pandemic and me being on military orders, we haven't gotten together lately. However, I usually put out a quilt about every month.
That's
Quilts of Valor.
That's fabulous. Okay, so talk about your men's group, because we have one of your quilts here, and it's this patchwork quilt, and I think you did 3 or 4 blocks that are part of this really great quilt. this quilt was actually a group effort. The men in Andrew's guild, everybody made a variety of blocks. So Andrew created 4 blocks, and then he made enough for everybody in the guild, and in the end they swapped, which is super cool. Fun things about this quilt are that most of the blocks could be made with our dies. For example, right here, this block, this pinwheel, kind of modified pinwheel, is just made with flying geese. Remember, shapes 4 and 5 in every cube have flying geese. This one is actually one of the blocks that Andrew made. Here are those half square triangles. And then right here, this is square on point, which is shapes 5 and 6. All right, the best thing about this quilt that I love is the quilting. So these are veterans, and they're a men's group. And look, all of the quilting has dog tags and stars. Super fun.
Okay, so because we do Quilts of Valor, we thought, well, because we're a group, we wanted to try to find a project that we could do together, but for each of us. So we each did 4 blocks for all of us in the group, and then we exchanged the blocks. So that way it's a quilt for us by us.
I thought that was a great concept of, creating your own blocks and then sharing them, and then everybody's a winner, right, in the end. Yep. What a great job. Oh, I just love it. And that one, does it have flange binding on it?
It does. That was my first attempt at flange binding. And for whatever reason, I misread the directions and made my flange bigger than what it was supposed to be.
Right.
In doing so, I mean, it's artistic freedom or liberties, if you will, to change things. A mistake that was made. I mean, it still turned out okay.
Sure. No, it's beautiful. It's here in the gallery and I love it. I'm a big fan of flange binding. We have 2 dies that we use to make flange binding. This quilt is entitled Mother's Looking Glass. And the thing that is so fun about this quilt is it's just a whole bunch of different sizes of strips. So if you have 3 or 4 or 5 or 7 strip dies, whichever ones you have in your collection, you could totally adjust this quilt to match the sizes of strips you have. The important thing is to remember that the sashing between it, to give it kind of that stained glass look, has to be the same size. But a great way to bust up your stash and use up your scraps. And I really love this one because not only the colors in it are so deep and rich and beautiful and a kind of jewel tone, but it's truly just strips, right? You just made variety sizes of strips and put sashing in between. Is that correct?
Yes. I had just started quilting and, I became a member of Smoky Mountain Quilt Guild, and they said, oh, the quilt show's coming up. You really need to make a quilt for this. You could be in the novice category. And I was like, oh, that'd be cool. So yeah. I'd already had an idea. And of course, procrastination is an item that many quilters deal with. So yes. In about 2 weeks, I finished and completed the quilt. It was going to be for my mother-in-law for Mother's Day, but I wanted to put it in the quilt show. So she had to delay receiving it until after the quilt show.
And did you win any ribbons in the quilt show?
I did. I won the novice award for that quilt.
Good man. Congratulations. That's great. I love it. It's a beautiful, beautiful quilt. All right, quilters, this is the perfect fall quilt. It's made completely out of flannel and it looks so warm and cozy, and it would be such an easy quilt to make. So the center square, you could use either the 8-inch square or the 6-inch square, and then add the strip dies around to create this super cool pattern. You'll notice that Andrew actually quilted it with acorns and leaves to, again, kind of remind you that this is a fall, warm, snuggly quilt. All right, next let's talk about your man quilt. This one's super fun. So it's a pattern called Villa Rosa, is that right?
Villarosa is the designer.
Okay.
And Voyager is the pattern.
Okay.
And the reason why I called it a man quilt is because it's what a men's suit material that Moda did. And that's what I feel like. Those are all like man suit materials. So in making the quilt, I thought I'm going to make one, really warm, and it'll be all flannel. Growing up in Michigan, it's cold. This would be a perfect quilt.
Tennessee, not so cold.
Yeah, not so much.
Not so much, but it's beautiful. And I do love the earth tones of it. I think it's just a perfect man quilt. I think it's great. This is such a classic pattern. Snails Trail, imagine how difficult it would be to cut all of these intricate pieces by hand. But this was actually Andrew's very first die that he used from the AccuQuilt collection, and he did a marvelous job with it. I love the fact that it's the red, white, and blue, that it has the sashing. This is also a really great block for chain piecing.
At first, I didn't really understand the benefits of AccuQuilt and how easy and precise. I'm military. I got 20 years, so I'm a little OCD, if you will, and can cut pretty accurately, but it takes a whole lot of time.
Right.
Well, AccuQuilt takes that away, not only the precision, but also the time. I cranked the quilt out through the Go Cutter in about 22 or 26 minutes. I don't remember exactly, but it was right about that. It was under 30 for sure.
Right.
And it went together in 2 evenings. I mean,
right.
It was... I was shocked.
Well, I would never have attempted it without a Go Cutter. I mean, there's no way I'm ever going to cut all the pieces for Snails Trail with a rotary cutter.
Well, I made the mistake of doing a pineapple quilt one time, and it took me 6 hours to do one block. How do people do that without an AccuQuilt? I have no idea.
Yeah, we have a die for that, by the way. So I love it. And I love that you put sashing in between it, because sometimes Snails Trail is just all of those pieces together. So the sashing looks just beautiful. And I love the colors of it. All right, so let's talk about actually my favorite quilt that you have here in the gallery. And it's my favorite because the story is a beautiful story. All right, quilters, if you're looking for a super easy, super fast quilt to make, this is what you want to make. All it is, half square triangles. It looks a little complicated. It looks like it might have parallelograms in it. But actually, if you look right here, you can just see that we used half square triangles sewn together to create kind of this pinwheel block. And Andrew did this really cool thing where he added sashing and cornerstones between it to really set off the blocks. This is an absolutely beautiful quilt, and again, a weekend project. So it's a replica quilt from your grandmother's quilt she made as a child, is that right?
Correct. My grandmother had made some quilts as a child. She was 13, I believe, is what my mother and I figured out the math. And she gave each of her kids a quilt.
Okay.
So my mother had received one, but before I started quilting, she gave that quilt to my brother. So
okay.
my brother has the quilt that my mother received on his wall at his house.
Right.
Well, once I started quilting, my uncle saw that I was quilting and thought that I should have this quilt that my grandmother, his mother, had made.
Right.
So in that, I made 2 quilts to replicate that. One that I gave to him to replace the one that he had gifted to me.
Oh, there you go.
One to my mother, because had it not been for my mother, I would have never received the quilt in the grand scheme of things. And then I still have the original that my grandmother had made.
Oh, and was she alive to see all of this whole process? Or is she
No, ma'am. My grandmother passed when I was in Iraq during my second deployment.
Oh, wow. What a great tribute to her. What a beautiful, beautiful way to tribute. I just love it. That of all the stories, that's my favorite here. So now, we call you the Combat Quilter, right? That's your website, right? That's how people can find you. So Andrew, tell us, if you're new to quilting, what would your advice be to new quilters?
My advice to new quilters would be relax, take a deep breath. It really isn't that serious. It's fabric. It can be cut apart and sewn back together and ripped and sewn back together. It's not that serious, not enough to get all worked up about, especially because quilting is so many folks' escape or therapeutic value, and let it be that. Finished quilt is better than a perfect quilt.
Oh, see, we should embroider that somewhere. That's a great saying. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. And again, thank you for your service here in our military. And we'll talk to you soon. Thanks again, Andrew.
Thank you, ma'am.
Bye. I hope you've enjoyed the quilts from Andrew Lee, otherwise known as the Combat Quilter, and a huge shout out to all of those serving in our military. Thank you for your service. Remember, quilters, at AccuQuilt, we help you cut time so you can quilt more. See you next time.